Hello, YouTube. Today I'm going to be responding to a YouTube short put out by the atheist YouTuber T-Jump.
A popular Christian and Muslim argument is that life can't come from non-life and consciousness can't come from non-consciousness. Now, these arguments are obviously wrong because they're composition division fallacies. It's like saying a wall can't come from a non-wall or that water can't come from non-water. Like clearly, hydrogen and oxygen, neither one of those is water, but when you add them together, they make water. Complex things can come from simpler things, and simply assuming that it's impossible for one particular thing to come from simpler things that don't have that property is just obviously fallacious.
He gave a very simple argument there. The problem with his argument is that there is disanalogies in key ways between the examples he gave and the things he's intending to prove can be produced by physical substrates. To understand this, we need to draw a distinction between strong emergence and weak emergence. In weak emergence, a full account of the causes can explain the effect, whereas in strong emergence, it's basically analogous to pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Let's take the first example he gave of building a brick wall. So yes, you can build a brick wall from things which are not themselves brick walls. But what you can't do is build a brick wall in a way which defies the principle of causality. The cause needs to be sufficient to bring about the effect. So you need to have sufficient intelligence, sufficient elbow grease, and the right kind of materials in order to build the brick wall. The example of water producing wetness or hydrogen and oxygen producing water is a little more complicated. For this, you need a physicist to explain it. Some time ago, I interviewed the physicist Stephen M. Barr. Here's what he had to say on the subject of water and whether we can fully explain the behavior of water based on our understanding of the atomic structure of water.
I won't say his name. I have great respect for him, but he said at the dinner that the properties of water don't follow from the fact that it's H2O or that the molecule, knowing that it's made up of hydrogen and oxygen and so on. And I said, actually, it does. The properties of water do flow from that. In fact, someone at my university, I'm now retired, but one of my colleagues in the University of Delaware Physics Department, a Polish physicist, and his colleagues in Poland have done massive computer calculations. It takes very, very powerful computers to simulate the properties of water, of a tiny droplet of water of, I don't know how many, maybe it was hundreds of water molecules. And they just simulated, from the equations of physics on a computer, how this little drop of hundreds of water molecules would behave. And not only did they simulate what things we knew about water, but they discovered things about water that were not known before. For example, no one had known in liquid water how many other water molecules are touching or next to a given water molecule. How do they fit together in the water? This was not really known, but the simulation gave the answer to that. So actually, we can determine the properties of water from the laws of physics and the fact that it's made of molecules of H2O. But as you say, wetness, what do you mean by wetness? If you mean by wetness some property that inheres in the water itself, something about the behavior of the water itself, then yes, we can understand that from physics. But if you mean by wetness the sensation of wetness that we have when we are wet and get out of the shower, or our hands are wet, no, that doesn't come from physics.
He then went on to talk about the qualia experience of color and how physics can't explain the sensation of seeing a red object. Physics can explain the frequency of light, but they have no explanation for the experience that a conscious entity has of that color spectrum. In short, my argument here is that T-Jump is confusing between weak emergence and strong emergence. He's giving examples of weak emergence where the cause is fully able to explain the effect and claiming that is evidence that strong emergence could be the case, that brains could pull a proverbial rabbit out of a hat and produce consciousness, despite nothing in brains being capable of doing such a thing as far as we understand the physical substrates of brains and what they're able to produce. We do understand some of the things brains do at a mechanistic and computational level, but we haven't got the fog. However, we are able to explain consciousness and honor the principle of causality if we add consciousness as being fundamental. If we compare this to the brick analogy, sure, you can build a brick wall from things which are not themselves brick walls, but you can't do it without an intelligent entity there arranging the bricks. Similarly, with brains and consciousness, you need the consciousness there as an ingredient added in order to explain how the thing works. Otherwise, we have no explanation for consciousness at all. This is a common trend in physics that as soon as their explanations bottom out, they just call that thing fundamental. As for the question of whether complex things can come from simple things, Stephen Meyer has done some excellent work on this subject. He showed that information always comes from an intelligent source. How he did this is using an inference to the best explanation. It's the same kind of logic that evolution uses to make its case, actually. The principle of logic at play here is that you use principles which we can currently observe in operation to explain historical causes. So when we see information being produced, it's always produced by an intelligent mind. There's not a single case where we can observe information, new information, being produced by something which is not an intelligent mind. Algorithms can iterate information, and the mutation selection process can iterate information or destroy it, but it is never observed producing new information. There are a few objections which are worth responding to in regards to Stephen Meyer's argument, but I won't be doing that in this video. In this video, I just wanted to focus on the point about water and how it is not an example of strong emergence, and it does not bolster a case for brains being able to produce consciousness.